What's that thing after limbo?
The lustful and Canto 5, this is the second group. But what was the first group of souls being punished that we saw? We saw some people being punished before we got to circle 2, limbo. Limbo is not really a place of punishment. There's no punishment there, but they don't have this hope of seeing God.
So many judging part?
Before that, before the judgment.
Oh. Before entering the hell.
Right, before they actually enter hell. Before we see these people being judged and sent to different portions of hell, we saw another place of punishment early on. What was that Canto 3?
Yeah, I just don't know.
Wow.
Right, the indecisive. The indecisive are being punished there. In this place, we call the vestibule of hell. It is the vestibule. It's not really quite part of hell yet. Yes, it's after the gate, but it's before they cross over the river Acheron into hell itself. Then we had limbo. The people who didn't pick a side, either for or against God. There's a famous line in the last book of the Bible, Apocalypse or Revelation, where a message is sent to one of the groups of Christians, and he says, "You are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you had either been hot or cold, but because you are lukewarm, I will spit you out of my mouth." And that's where Dante's getting this from. These people, they were neither hot nor cold. They didn't live lives of either virtue or vice, either good or evil. And so they've been spit out. They're not in real hell, definitely not in purgatory, definitely not in heaven. They're sort of in this in-between place. Yes?
How does someone get baptized?
Get baptized?
Yeah.
It's very easy. You take water, you pour it on their head, and you say, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." Technically, you can do it only pouring water once, or you can dunk them into the water. That works too. What was that? Yeah, by immersion.
But how was that?
Yeah, usually nowadays it's done in infancy, within like a couple months of birth is usually when it's done. But adults can get baptized. We had a student here who he was in 11th or 12th grade. He got baptized, I think, at Mr. Tobin's parish. Was that earlier this year? I guess it was like a year and a half ago. But the priest only poured the water once, which is not how you're supposed to do it. But it still counts. Yeah. So I mean, there's more to the ceremony than that, but that's the important part. They say, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. So baptism becomes relevant because limbo here. The people who are in limbo, they don't deserve punishment, but they also can't get into heaven because they weren't baptized. What is it that baptism does? Anybody know what baptism does that makes the difference here between limbo or heaven, which is otherwise where they would be? These souls would be in heaven if they had been baptized. They led good lives. Right. It makes this covenant between the person and God. And specifically what it does is it removes what's called original sin. Remember when we read Genesis? There's this sin of Adam and Eve in the garden, and everything else, all the rest of sin of mankind follows from that. And so when we're born, we're already sinful because that sin has been passed down. And so baptism then removes that and begins what's called the life of grace, the supernatural life. So these people in limbo, they led good lives using their own abilities. But with baptism gets you not only your own natural abilities, but also the supernatural abilities that come from God, from grace. And baptism is the gateway, Dante says, to that. Okay, so the cross of the Acheron, limbo to lust. Souls being punished here. Who are the people in this circle that you need to know? What are their names?
In limbo?
In circle 2, the lustful. Who are the two people that you need to know? Yes, this couple, their names are Paolo
Francesca.
and Francesca. Yes, Paolo and Francesca. You got to know them and their story. Can somebody recap for me what the story?
She was married to Paolo's older brother.
Yes. Yep.
What's his name? Dr. Mom said that she cheated on him and they died together.
Yes, yeah. How did they die?
Ugly brush
He
shot.
killed him, right?
Yes, yeah. Her husband killed both of them. He caught them.
Now Ugly Brush that stayed in the fraud, right? He got fraud.
Yeah, he's down the bottom in one of the sections of fraud. He caught them. The Latin expression is in flagrante delicto, which means he caught them red-handed in the act.
What language is that?
Latin. It's just a fancy way of saying he caught them in the act, in flagrante delicto. It's just a sort of fun expression. So no. Okay. Yes. So that was what happened with Paolo and Francesca, and for their lust, their lack of control over that sexual desire that they had for each other, which they shouldn't have been giving into, they end up in this section of hell. So how are Paolo and Francesca and the other souls here being punished?
Isn't it where it fly around where they don't have any direction?
Right.
Just flying
Yeah. Why don't they have control of their direction as they fly?
Because they can't control the
Right. But what physical thing is happening to these souls in hell? Yeah, there's this big storm, this giant storm with these strong winds. And so they're getting blown this way and that. And so this is symbolizing the way in which their desires carried them back and forth. With these very strong desires that we have, they're not always consistent. They can change direction quickly, and they pull us this way and that way. And so if we don't master them, then they pull us around. Right. So that's how they're being punished here. Dante has this conversation with Francesca. Paolo's there, but he doesn't say anything. And what's interesting about this conversation that Dante has with Francesca?
He asked her what happened. And all she would say is love, love, love.
Yes, love, love, love. She starts 3 stanzas in a row with the word love. Who? So she says, well, it's because of love. I'm here because of love. But, we know there's more to the story than this. What are some of the details that she leaves out? Or what are some of the things that she maybe shifts the emphasis on when she tells Dante her story?
She didn't say
The whole version.
Yeah, what are some things that she left out?
I don't remember. But you said she got the boy part.
And she doesn't mention about the fact that she was married and that her husband was this guy's brother.
Oh, I thought that was already understood.
Well, so we know that as the audience, but that's not in. Francesca never says that to Dante here.
Well, why does it say? So Dante asked them why they in hell together.
Well, he doesn't. He doesn't actually ask them why they're together.
They just come and say.
But yeah, she says that they're together, and they're stuck here. They, in particular, have as part of their punishment that they're stuck together in hell. That they're never separated from each other. But it doesn't seem to be a good relationship. Paolo's just crying all the time. She doesn't even mention his name when she talks about him. She calls him this one. Yes. Also, one of the details from the historical version to the version that Francesca tells him is Francesca says to Dante in line 133, it was when we read about those longed for lips now being kissed by such a famous lover that this one, who shall never leave my side, then kissed my mouth and trembled as he did. She says that Paolo kissed her first, but in fact, historically, she was the one who kissed him first. Yeah, you can read a bit more about this in the notes there.
Yeah.
Now, how does Dante react to her life story here? Pity. What is pity?
Like you feel sad. Like you feel sorry for them.
He's sorry for them. Empathy. He doesn't quite think that it's fair.
That's because
It's surprising he doesn't. He doesn't. But he should have known better. Why?
Because of the past with Alexander?
Yeah, well, he saw these other people there.
Oh, because
that he knows
God
about.
told him watch who you trust.
Right, Minos, the judge who tells people what circle of hell they go to, told him, be careful whom you trust.
They're there for a reason.
They're there for a reason. And Dante misses this here. The pilgrim, the character Dante, falls for this romanticized version of events. Right? This is not what actually happened to Paolo and Francesca, but it's a sort of way of retelling it that makes it seem so nice and happy and full of love and whatever. But it's not actually real, and Dante falls for it. Remember that Dante, the author, is writing about himself. The character here is inspired by himself. And Dante, a lot of what he did up to the time when he wrote the Divine Comedy was he wrote this kind of love poetry that they were reading when they started kissing each other, and then so on and so forth. This is one of the, this was the tendency in medieval literature to have this sort of romanticized idea of love. The story of Lancelot and Guinevere, oh, it's so romantic, this forbidden love. But wait a minute, he's cheating with his master's wife, with the king's wife, the king who trusts him. And so Dante here, like much of the poetry of the Middle Ages, falls for this distorted idea of love, this romanticized idea of love, where it's this beautiful emotion that springs up and, oh, we just lost control. And right. Well, it's easy to lose sight of these things because these emotions are so strong. Right? And then he passes out. He feels so bad. Questions about Canto 5? Those questions will be due tomorrow. Let's see. Where should we go next? We could do 6. 6 is where we see the sin of gluttony. What's gluttony? So lust is an uncontrolled desire for sex. Gluttony is an uncontrolled desire for food. Yes. Yeah. So that's in Canto 6. Canto 7 is greed. And so gluttony is next. That's Canto 6. Greed comes next. Greed's an uncontrolled desire. You're certainly welcome to read them. They're worth reading, but we don't have time to read every canto, unfortunately. So we're going to skip to 8. So if you look at, let's turn back to, what is it, page 88, I think?
Oh, wait,
yes.
We're not reading 6 or 7?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you go back to page 88, looking at this map of hell, so we saw, for that, circle 4 is hoarders and spendthrifts, so people, either sins of greed, either of people who didn't control their desire to get money or their desire to spend money, because that can also be a kind of uncontrolled desire with regard to money, right? Just being a spendthrift, just spending your money on anything and everything, right? Not controlling that desire to spend your money on things that would be more prudent to spend your money on. So notice that circle 4, it's hoarders, people who just wanted to keep their money, and spendthrifts, people who just can't stop spending their money.
So is ordering still like part of that?
So
Like
trying to
Hoarding, because that's not, so it's an uncontrolled desire. Money has a purpose, and so
It's like they're being cheap.
it's sort of like being cheap, but also spending money too carelessly. These are both.
That's worse than
Yeah, Dante thinks that these are worse than lust. Interestingly, he thinks that. So after lust comes what? What sin comes after the lust? Gluttony. Now, what's the similarity maybe between lust and gluttony?
It's for you. Well,
A little more
it's for
specific.
you.
Yeah, all of this it's a kind of uncontrolled self-centeredness. But what's specifically similar about lust and gluttony? Lust is a desire for
It's for sex. And then
Sex.
like it's for food.
food. So they both have to do with what? What kind of things?
Nutrition.
Materialistic.
No, because
Closer.
Yeah, something.
how? I don't know how to keep
Gluttony,
sex.
food and sex. What's the similarity between them? Both of them are things related to our what?
Body.
To our bodies. Yes, to our bodies. Lust and gluttony, this desire for food, those are both bodily desires. And so those are strong desires that we have. You know, our bodies, they want things. We want things for our bodies. In the Christian, from the Christian perspective, as a human, you've got two parts to you. You've got your body and you've got your soul. The body is the less important part and the less good part. It's still good, but it's less important than the soul. And so because these two are connected with the body, Dante doesn't think that they're as important as the other two or as the next one for money, which that's more of a disorder of the soul. It has more to do with power and control than it does with our bodily desires. The bodily desires, it's really easy to slip up with those. Incredibly easy. They're very strong desires. So falling for them, you know, it's not so hard to do. We're continuing to ascend up here. And then we'll see in Canto 7, 8, which we're going to read next. We'll get circle 5, where we have wrath. What is wrath?
Power.
Not power. Remember, all these are sins of not having self-control. What is wrath? Wrath is, anger. So what is this? What are people not controlling here? Sins of wrath.
Their anger, their emotions.
Yeah, they're emotions. And emotions are very closely connected to the soul. We've got wrath after this.
So would you compare that with gluttony and lust then? Since it's
You coming the closer, the sins that have to do with souls far lower than the sins of the body.
Yes, because the soul is more important. So having a messed up soul is worse than having a messed up body. Notice down at the bottom, fraud. Fraud, deception, there isn't even necessarily much of a bodily component to that.
are we still in the first part?
Yes, we're still in the first part of hell. Notice this map here on 88 is just the top section of hell, the sins of the wolf. Okay, and wrath, we could say, here, gluttony has to do with food. Talking about money, we've got people who hoard their money and people who just spend it all away. And then really with wrath, we can say, we're talking here about not controlling your emotions. So we've got wrath, and also here, it's not mentioned on the map, but it's the sin of sloth. What's sloth?
Slow?
Sloth.
The butt. Like, that.
You said that happened?
No. Like, you use money for casino or gamble.
Gambling?
Yeah, gamble.
No, that's not sloth. Sloth is laziness, more or less. Not doing things because they're hard. That's sloth. And so here, that's also not controlling your emotions.
So like procrastination?
Procrastination could be a type of sloth. Okay? Not putting in the effort on whatever you're doing. Not putting the effort to do things correctly or well enough or whatever. It could be a kind of sloth. So here, wrath and sloth, both not controlling your emotions. Because your emotions say, man, that's hard. I want to avoid doing hard things because that's difficult. And so that's a type of sloth. So here, this is what we're going to get in Canto 8. And that's where we're going to move next. And notice, wrath, these are the sins of the top section of hell. The sins of which animal? the she-wolf, which are sins of what? What do we call them?
Concupiscence?
Yeah, concupiscence or incontinence.
Incontinence.
Okay.
Lack of self-control.
Yep. Incontinence, the wolf. What's the next section?
Violence.
Violence. The lion. And what's the last sin here in incontinence before we get to violence?
What do you mean?
What's
Like emotion? The emotion? The wrath?
very close to
Violence.
violence?
Wait.
Oh.
Oh, anger.
Right, wrath, anger, as these sins, the sins
Oh,
of
they get
incontinence,
worse.
as they get worse, they get closer to the sins of violence. Wrath, not controlling your emotions, your anger, starts to edge you very close to sins of violence, which we'll get in the next section of hell. Notice how carefully Dante has structured this.
Dang, but they couldn't even put my man in the second level. They put him all the way at the bottom.
Who? Francesca's husband?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it makes sense though, because
I'm inclined to agree with you. It seems to me that he should be here.
Yeah.
This is where Francesca's husband should be. It's possible there's more to the story that I'm not aware of or that people in general aren't aware of. That might be an interesting thing to write about in a response paper. You know, that's a great
I like
kind of topic to write about for the infirm. If there are particular things that strike you as particularly appropriate or inappropriate,
Because that's not fair.
go ahead and write about those. You know, maybe you think that he should be here. Maybe you think he should be in purgatory.
being a fraud.
Wouldn't it be the wife?
It should be the wife.
Because she's acting as if she's a wife.
She's well,
I mean, he knows they're married.
she's
Yeah, so the bride.
acting delusional now, but in real life she wasn't acting.
Right, she just sort of gave in. I think Francesca's in the right place. It's hard to say about her husband, though. Yeah, why is he all the way down there? But then again, of course, another thing to consider
He killed him.
is what? What's the other thing that we should consider here?
Family problem.
It's
Is
your family.
okay, yeah. So she says he's down here where people who betray their family go. Caina, named after Cain, who killed his brother Abel, and this guy killed his brother Paolo. But what other thing might be happening here? And I have to go and I have to check later on when in Caina and see if this is confirmed. What's the problem with Francesca and the things that she tells Dante?
She's lying.
Not all of them are true. Not all of them are true. We had seen back in, I think, Canto 3, when we see these souls going towards the boat.
You said dreams?
No, in Canto 3, the souls who are going towards the boat over the river, right after they pass the vestibule. This is in Canto 3 on page 92.
That's crazy. We haven't read Canto yet.
We haven't gotten to 8 yet. No.
Um,
So notice here on page 92, as they're waiting to cross the river, he says in line 100, but all those souls that are naked in despair, these are the damned souls waiting to get sent into hell, changed color, and their teeth began to chatter at the sound of his announcement of their doom. They were cursing God, cursing their own parents, the human race, the time, the place, the seed of their beginning, and the day of their birth. One of the things about the souls in hell is they are not happy to be there, and like Francesca, they're willing to blame anybody else.
But what do you get out of that though? You already expect it.
Yeah, it doesn't get you anything. It's just, I mean, you know, to pick a sort of trivial analogy, you know, it's like a little kid having a tantrum almost. You know, it's not like the kid gets anything out of a tantrum. It doesn't help him,
It makes it worse.
but he's out of control, right? And in fact, it makes it worse. And that's part of the punishment here.
now see, I'm really gonna write about that. 'Cause I'm-
Yeah, that's a great thing to write about. And it might be interesting to check in.
Wait, can you tell me what section we start going into the fraud part?
So that's not gonna be until like
Hey,
the 20s or something. But it's okay. Listen, it's okay if you don't. It's okay if you leave that out, whether he's in fact mentioned there, right? Your response papers don't have to deal with any part of the book that we haven't read yet. If you want to go look at another part of the book, that's fine, but you don't have to.
my next responsibility is gotta be honored.
Yeah, good. Good. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I like teaching this book is because you get a lot of strong emotions out of it. And so take those emotions, tell me why you feel them, or why you think that Dante got something wrong or right, and tell me about it. You know, I think this particular, where he's got wrath right on the border between incontinence and violence, I think...
And all that, right, so up top over there, at the beginning of, no, like in the middle of hell, instead of the top.
Well, this is the top section of hell, still.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
In that top.
In that section.
Oh, uh-huh.
I feel like
You think they should be higher up or lower?
Food should be like higher than last.
I just think food should be the first section.
So gluttony, you would move gluttony up right below limbo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what?
I just switch with lust.
I think lust should be like. I think money should go ahead of lust.
So you think...
I don't think.
Because I mean, it's money, but like sex is
Yeah,
something deeper.
but like,
If I mean,
what money
feel like
is, if you earn it, it
should
kind of
be
gives like a
lower.
selfish right to be selfish.
Yeah,
But
that's what I'm
with lust, it involves somebody else. So
Yes. Yeah.
like, it should be.
Oh well,
Yeah, that is one strange thing about lust is that lust, I mean, obviously not always because there are sins of lust that don't involve other people, shall we say. But lust is generally something that involves the connection between two people. And so in that sense, and this is, I think, part of Dante's reason why he puts it so high up, is that that's kind of like love. Love has to do with two people. You can't have love with just like, loving yourself is not the same kind of thing as loving another person. And so the same way that, wrath is very close to violence, lust, we could say, is sort of, it's almost close to love, almost. Obviously it's not, it's on this side of the border, but there's a kind of similarity.
Since he had the emotion so close to violence, I wonder when we go, like, we're not going to be purgatory, but I wonder what he had to write the last sin.
Yeah.
The very last level of purgatory. I wonder
At the bottom level of purgatory?
Yeah, before we go into vestibule and all that.
Oh yeah. That would be good to know. I don't remember. I've actually read the beginning of Purgatory, but
Why wouldn't you read this section?
The first section, Inferno, is the one that people most commonly read for whatever reason. I think because it's you tend to get these strong emotions. It's the first part. People like talking about hell and sin and all this. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's definitely worth taking a look at the other ones. Maybe I'll bring in a copy of the other two parts.
I know there's a movie to this.
Tomorrow we could check. Is there?
No, I'm asking you.
I don't know of one that sort of follows the
But I didn't even listen to it.
plot of this.
I don't know, like a show.
What there is there's I'm trying to remember who wrote it, but some guy wrote like his own version of it, where instead of the people in there being people from Dante's time, he uses people from like recent history and puts them in there. Because remember, that's what Dante did here. He puts people in hell that are still alive at the time that he's writing it.
Okay.
These are the things they did.
Yeah, he made a lot, and a lot of people that he personally knew, he puts in different portions of hell and purgatory and heaven. He fills this with real life people that he knew personally. And that's the only reason why we know and care about them, is because Dante wrote about them, and we care about Dante. So yeah, Dante made a lot of enemies with this book. People were not super happy, especially some of the people that he put in hell.
But he's being active.
Yeah, I mean, and remember, Dante was kicked out of his home city for the rest of his life because of these political squabbles that have been going on. I mean, you had people murdering each other in the streets, in political violence almost every day in these Italian cities.
Again, with Paolo's brother.
Mm-hmm.
How does he divide violence? Because I know there has to be some type of violence that has to do with anger too.
Yes.
So why didn't he just put him in any section like, because of the betrayal of the family?
Yeah, so here, so it's the betrayal of the family. Generally speaking, it's the worst things that win out.
But he betrayed him too. That's what I'm trying to say.
We betrayed him first, really.
Well, so yeah, I mean, here's the question. So, like, generally speaking, the sins of incontinence, that's a lack of self-control. This is, generally speaking, this is stuff that it's not so much that you're like trying to do something wrong as that you give in to a temptation. That's why so like Paolo, apparently it wasn't that he was like making this plan to seduce his brother's wife. That would put him into the fraud section down below. We see those people later. If he had been actively trying to seduce her, Dante, in Dante's opinion, Dante would have put him down with the seducers who are down in the fraud section of hell. But here, since it was just an improper desire that he gave into, Dante thinks that that's.
Why is Dante acting like his brother plan on killing him?
Yeah, I know. So that's the question: is if this guy actually went to the fraud section, then that means that there was some kind of plan here done by his brother, which maybe there was. But I don't.
Also, maybe he didn't walk into them. Maybe he couldn't make it.
That could be. Because that part of Francesca's story could be,
That's the only thing.
or what about this? This is a really dark take on things. But, this would, I think, get you down to the betrayal of family section of hell. What if the ugly husband knew that maybe the ugly brother is jealous of the good-looking brother? And he doesn't like his wife for some reason, and he sets them up like this so that he can have an excuse to murder them.
Yo,
Is that a dark enough take on things?
I can write a show on that.
Yeah, you could write a show on this. I mean, it's crazy. This is like, you couldn't make this stuff up. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. If you're going to go out for lunch, if you're going to go off campus for lunch, you can go. If you're going to stay on campus, we ask you to eat here. Goodbye. No, we didn't even start Canto 8. That's fine.
It's got